Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Neha Matthew Shah, and I'm the Associate Director of Sierra Club's International Climate and Policy Campaign. We're hosting this webinar today to commemorate 1 year since the launch of the first Global Grassroots Leaders Climate Summit, which we convened along with Friends of the Earth US last year. Since then, we've hosted a second summit and engaged 44 grassroots organizations from across 20 countries in the global south. The purpose of these summits has been twofold and driven entirely by our partners internationally. It's been about centering and elevating the experiences, the knowledge, and demands of grassroots leaders at a global level and scale, and about prioritizing the experiences and solutions of impacted communities in their countries and building accountability towards these frontline communities. So we're really glad that you're joining us today, and especially grateful to the climate leaders who have joined this call from across the continent of Africa, South and Southeast Asia. Thank you for your valuable time here today to share your experiences on the ground, particularly today around adaptation, loss and damage. So I'm going to kick it off with asking Sherelle Blazer, who's our Senior Director of Sierra Club's International Climate and Policy Campaign based out of New Orleans, Louisiana, but currently in Germany for the United Nations Climate Conference. Sherelle, thanks for getting on today, and wonder if you can just set us up here with what is adaptation, loss and damage about, and why does it matter? And I know there's a lot happening there on the ground at the conference. So can you share a little bit about what you're seeing?
Yes, thank you for having me. Yeah, and this is so exciting. 1 year. I can't believe we're having this celebration. I'm really happy about it. I'm glad to have everyone on. Um, Adaptation, loss, and damage. So, when you think about climate change and the effects of climate change, the last IPCC report came out and it talked about uh, the experience that people are having with climate change, that the impacts. And adaptation is about what we can live with, right? So climate change is happening, and what can we do to live with the changes in the environment? And it's sometimes it's an engineered fix, sometimes it's a built fix. And then loss and damage is about those impacts that we can't live with, right? We can't build something to fix it. Um, it's just loss and damage. It's exactly like what it sounds like. And you can't talk about those two without talking about mitigation a little bit. And mitigation is all about what you can do to stop, slow down, or reverse climate change. So, since this is a US facing webinar, and I'm from the Gulf South, when I think about these terms, I think about them in terms of hurricanes, right? So we could mitigate for hurricanes by moving from a fossil fuel based economy, doing things to take carbon and other greenhouse gases out of the air, increasing nature based solutions like forests and other natural lands. But outside of that, we can also build levees like we do. And that's an adaptation, right? We can build levees and we can put houses up on stilts, and we can have, waterways where people can get around by boat, things of that nature. That's adaptation. And then loss and damage is everything that the um, the levees won't protect homes from, right? So if your roof is blown off, if all the trees are gone, if all the schools are closed, if there's no food or water or gasoline, which is generally what happens after every hurricane, that's all loss and damage. That has to be rebuilt, and people have to be. It costs money. It's very costly. Um, and someone said something really interesting. Here, there's something going on called a Glasgow Dialogue. It was established at the last COP26. It's supposed to be dealing with the issues of loss and damage, which weren't dealt with at the last COP. And loss and damage, there's money, there needs to be a facility created so that money can be amassed to help people rebuild after they've been through some catastrophic climate event. And someone said that, the poor have been paying for loss and damage, right? And that's so very true, in thinking of, I'm sure everyone on this webinar can tell stories about, yes, how we have indeed already been paying. And so there does need to be a facility created and a fund created to help countries with these issues and impacts.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that explainer there, Sherelle.
Yes.
And now I'm going to move it forward through our climate leaders around the world to share their experiences. So we can kick it off with Von Michael Tobes, who's a climate justice activist and grassroots organizer from the Philippines. His work is focused around bringing his narrative on the front lines of the climate crisis to the international scene, along with the fight for equality and gender justice, better food systems, climate education, and mental health. Vaughn is the founder of Zero Hour Philippines and Project EIM and is currently the director of Zero Hour Asia. Vaughn, we are so grateful to have you on again, and we would love to hear from you about your experiences. Thanks.
Yes. So, good day, everyone, and good evening from the Philippines. I am Von Michael, an 18 years old climate education, food systems, and equality activist and writer from one of the most impacted islands in the world, Samar, Philippines. My country, the Philippines, is not only the most impacted and most vulnerable countries to climate change, it's also listed as one of the most dangerous places in the world for environmental defenders, climate activists, indigenous peoples, and human rights advocates who are fighting daily for the rights of the people and the environment and blocking environmentally harmful projects that are rapidly spreading throughout the country. Noting my country and my people did not only experience and face the instant, life threatening manifestations of the climate crisis, such as the top five strongest typhoons in recorded history that all occurred in my country, or the floods, landslides, and other disasters. The climate crisis is more than just those. We also experience the slow, drastic effects of the climate crisis on our livelihood, our health, our people, our communities, and its impacts to our food security, and all the other wide-scale, long-lasting impacts that only worsens the effects of these climate-induced and climate change exacerbated disasters. Moreover, my country and my region are also the world's hotspot for marine plastic pollution. We don't have access to any sustainable choices, and we are forced to live and consume plastic daily. On my island, our main source of income and food is fishing. There are some farmers and some working in other industrial jobs. Manaragat and Sapyawan are unique ways of fishing and protecting the sea that can only be found in my city and my community. Hence, why we are called people of the sea. These fishing techniques that date back to 100 years ago not only involve sustainable harvesting, but also include a balanced harmony with nature and the sea and rituals. With the increasing negative impacts of marine plastic pollution and the strengthening and more frequent effects of the climate crisis, we have seen a huge decline in marine species in our bays. This does not only affect our daily lives, especially having to desperately find other ways to get food, but also leaves us vulnerable during calamities wherein most of us don't have sources and resources to prepare before the impact and recover after. The climate crisis is more than just the headlines in international newspapers and opinion pieces of climate experts who aren't even on the ground on the front lines. It's also the blackened names in our obituaries and speeches of world leaders of our dead loved ones. The impacts on our communities, on ourselves, not only physically and economically, but also mentally. But more than just these negative side effects of the climate crisis, community resistance and grassroots solidarity are also highlighted. In 2020, a Harvard study revealed that over 50% of Filipinos are unaware of climate change, despite being the country where most of the disproportionate impacts of the climate crisis hit. I would like to highlight how the lack of education in frontline communities and the inaccessibility of climate information to countries like the Philippines and many other nations in the global south also worsens the impacts of the climate crisis. Many, if not all, current educational resources are only in English and some are in Filipino. The Philippines is a country with over 100 spoken languages. This means that many communities, especially marginalized, frontline and less fortunate communities are being left behind by the current educational system. And many Filipinos do not have the privilege or luxury to go to school. Not only does our current climate educational resources are only being available in English or a national language in many global south countries, they also contain specific scientific jargons and terms that may not be familiar to many, to those who have not been able to school, making our current climate information exclusive to those who speak a certain language and have gone to school or even take STEM. In my years of visiting communities and teaching less fortunate kids and engaging in conversations with communities, especially unreachable far-flung ones, I have learned that many people learn through many different mediums. Climate information only being available in text makes climate education exclusive and ableist. We have to highlight and recognize the gaps in climate education and the disparities in climate education to be able to make climate information accessible to everyone. Because if it's not accessible to the poor and less fortunate, it's neither radical or revolutionary. Transforming the climate movement and making it inclusive for activist and non-activist youth and adult allies, especially those who are in frontline countries of the climate crisis, would mean that education is accessible to everyone. Climate education is a form of reparations, fair distribution of funding, opportunities, and resources, and a safe space where we pass the mic and highlight the voices of the grassroots and frontlines. I believe that climate knowledge, when infused with firsthand experience, can inspire actually radical and transformative climate solutions where no communities or individuals are left behind. This is what climate justice looks like. Community based solutions and solutions made by frontline communities must be highlighted because I believe that those who experience the crisis firsthand are closest to the solution. My work focuses on engaging with frontline and grassroots communities, teaching kids, demanding the ban of plastic in many cities in the Philippines, phase out fossil fuels in the country, and also advancing climate action through mobilization of youth and children. But beyond just working towards a better Philippines, I have been working on advancing climate actions and making climate education accessible in Asia, most especially in Southeast Asia. As director of Zero Hour Asia, I have been working with Earth Day Network Asia as ambassador and many different organizations and have been reaching out to departments and ministries of education in Asia to incorporate climate education in the educational system of Asian countries. Recently, I have worked with the United Nations Environment Program to highlight how marine plastic pollution is affecting Asia, especially Southeast Asia, where we reached over 10 million people. Climate action is not only seen in protests, educational workshops and symposiums, or webinars. True climate action and resistance lies with the people and communities that strengthen both the climate movement and social movement and us individually. The climate spirit lies within the heart of the passionate community that works toward flourishing its people and protecting the environment. And most often, they are the ones being left behind in climate conversations and dialogues, political processes, and international events that not only decide where the world is going to be in the next 10 years, but where my community will be and what it's going to be left with tomorrow. Solidarity and resistance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vaughn. Some very meaningful and true words there, and I think very critical when it comes to adaptation issues is we need to be speaking to and bringing access to the people who are directly impacted for those solutions. Um, so we'll come back with some questions in a little bit, but I want to move forward to Asim Nawaz Khan, who was working for affected communities in Pakistan since 2002. He raised the voices of people at the national and international forums affected by international finance institution supported projects in Pakistan. He also raised environmental debt and economical issues and damages by the World Bank, Chinese banks, ADB, and AIIB projects. Asim, thank you so much for joining today. And if you can share a little bit about your work, that would be great. And feel free to share your screen. If that's not working, we'll let you know and then we can move from there. Yeah, I can see it. Asim, you're muted.
My screen is visible. Okay.
Yeah.
So actually, I want to tell you about the background of our situation in Pakistan. Basically, the Pakistan is in a big trouble nowadays due to the political situation, but we have some invasions also in our country. So I started from the Chinese invasion in Pakistan's economy. When the Pakistan's total public and publicly guaranteed external debt stood at 44.35 billion in just June 2013, and this is just 9.3% of which was owed by China. And by April 2021, this external debt had ballooned to 90.12 billion, with Pakistan owing 27.4 billion US dollar of its total external debt to China, according to the IMF. So this is a huge portion of external debt we are owing from China. So in 2016, 40% of Pakistan stock exchange shares were sold to a Chinese consortium. It was reported, and it was very well know the people. And in January 2021, our total circular debt is rupees 2306 billion rupees. So this is basically the economic situation and Chinese invasion in Pakistan's economy. How much portion they are taking in Pakistan, economy. So when I talk about the Chinese coal plants, and that 11 Chinese companies share their concerns, while 8 independent power plants were waiting for the clearance for their cumulative dues of rupees 340 billion to cover the cost of power generation nowadays, because the Pakistan government cannot pay the uh, payments to these 11 companies. So now, Pakistan just one is the Saiwal coal power plant is only 96.4 billion rupees Pakistan have to pay. From 2016 to 2020, financial institutions provided US dollar 13 billion in coal attributable loans and underwriting services to companies active in thermal coal in Pakistan. Financial institutions from China provided the most gold attributable USD 8.9 billion. So, on the other side, there is an organization, international organization, Fair Finance Asia, done a research, and he researched with the help of Profunda. They revealed that the financial institutions from China provided the most coal attributable credit is 8.9 billion, but financial institutions from the US were the largest investor, holding US dollar 53 million in bonds and shares. Actually, these figures, I will talk about these figures after my presentation, because this was astonishing for us in starting, because as a grassroots worker, We first we talk with the government of Pakistan. What are they doing? What are you doing? Why you are expanding the coal power plants? And after that, we talk to the Chinese banks, why they are investing in Pakistan, and why they are giving us the oldest and outdated power plants to Pakistan. But I was just luckily I joined the finance campaign school, which is organized by the Orba Germany. So I come to know that the behind these Chinese companies, these financial institutions, US is the largest investor. So I will talk about that after this presentation. So 10 investors accounted for 97% of shareholders. The largest coal investor in Pakistan was US asset manager Vanguard. Its worth is 32 million US dollar, followed by US peer BlackRock USD 40 million dollars, and South Korea's Miras Asset Financial Group USD 3 million. So these are the three main shareholders of the coal financial institutions. After that, over the past, I want to share some situations in Pakistan. Over the past 2 decades, climate change in Pakistan resulted in a loss of more than half a percent of per unit of GDP, resulting in 3.8 billion US dollar of annual income economic losses, is according to the Pakistan Stock Exchange. And according to the Global Climate Risk Index annual report for 2020, Pakistan has lost 0.53% per unit GDP, suffered economic losses worth 3,792.52 million US dollar, and witnessed 152 extreme weather events from 1999 to 2018. So when we talk about the Pakistan NDC document, it's revealed that the country needs US dollar 40 billion US dollar to reduce 20% of its emission for 2030, and 7 to 14 billion annually for the adaptation only. So this is the actually the situation, and the Pakistan's responsibility, the Pakistani government, I think, is I must say, do the criminal negligence. They heavily invested the dirtiest fossil fuel on earth, coal, and then can further exacerbate its development to climate change. The coal projects are part of the legacy we inherited from the previous government, PMLN government from 2013 to 2018, which has unfortunately locked us into long-term contracts with sovereign guarantees. So we cannot move anywhere. This is the basically the background of the situation. But when we talk about the grassroots level, we talk with the people. Where I was talked with the people of the Saival, affected people of Saival coal power plants. I went to the third desert where the most of the power plants are there, and coal mines are there. So people are suffering, very extreme poverty. They don't know, because the government and the allies are portray a very greenery pictures, that you will get the jobs, you will get the money, you will be economically better with these power plants, coal power plants. But actually, it is reversed. You all know that it is not the economic opportunity, is the death warrant of the people, innocent people who don't know basically the damages, who don't know the problems of the environment pollutions. They don't know the problems of ash. They don't know the other polluted ingredients in the air, which is the coal power plants are spreading in the air nearby. So now, this is the basically background of our Pakistan situation I want to share. And this is basically when I started the advocacy campaign for the people of affected people of coal power plants back in for 5 years ago, 2017 and 18, because this was the start of the power plants. So we were always blame our government of Pakistan why they are taking this actually, but in developing countries, government people, politicians have their own interest. Very frankly, I want to say they have their own interest, and they just protect their own interest, not the people interest. So they accepted the outdated coal power plants from China, and now with the sovereign guarantee, we will face them for 25 years. Uh, I am very I'm very uh, feeling very bad. So after that, some of the international organizations contacted me, and I contacted with some of the international organizations, and then with the I think that was the bank tracker and some others. So we talked with the banks of Chinese, and we talk with them. We send them letters, and we raise our concerns at some of the international forums. But when in last 2 3 months, when I joined the finance school, I came to know that these all Chinese banks, financial institutions are backed by the US investors. You see, uh, you will see that this is the US is the largest investor, holding 53 billion US dollars in terms of bonds and shares in these in financial institutions. So I'm just confused to whom we should blame, to whom we should do the advocacy, to whom we should say our concerns. The people are crying near Saiwal coal power plants. People are crying near the third power plants. So they are deprived of their land, they are deprived of their jobs. So they are forced to leave those areas. I have done some one of my research on US on the sorry Saiwal coal power plants. I can share with some of you, all of you. So this is now the situation is this. We are looking for a way forward. To whom we blame for coal expansions? Pakistan government, China, or USA? We don't know. As a grassroots people, we need the guidance of the senior people, well informed people and organizations. I am very thankful to Neha who gave me this chance, because we don't have Pakistan civil society is not well equipped, not have the big contacts with the international organizations, and the people basically are contactless. They are miserable. They don't have the contacts. They don't know where to go. uh, Even the Pakistan has no adaptation or mitigation strategy. Pakistani government, they have something in NDC, they have something in in the papers, but they are not implementing anything at ground. So not the government nor the civil society is educated. We don't have some well research based climate change issues. We don't have any research at the grassroots level. We don't have the special or comprehensive research on Pakistan climate issues. So this is basically the issue, and nowadays we are facing more than 42 degree centigrade heat wave, and this is the basically. And when I talk in last week, we have you will see the hottest day. One of CB and Jacobabad is the hottest place in the world. So I request the senior people to guide us where we should start now again to our advocacy campaign to save our people. Thank you very much, all of you, for listening me.
Thank you, Asim. Yes, incredibly challenging and frustrating work, but also important. I appreciate everything you shared with us, and I think this is why we want to host these spaces, and even outside of these public webinars, we are working to connect communities and individuals doing this work across so many countries. I unfortunately see a lot of similarities between what you are experiencing and seeing there to other countries that have also been heavily impacted by coal expansion. Um, I am now going to pass it to Omar. Omar El-Mawi currently serves as the coordinator for the Stop East Africa crude oil pipeline campaign. At the Stop EACOP campaign, Omar works with 260 other organizations from across Tanzania, Uganda, and the rest of the world. Omar has been working for many years assisting communities to assert their rights and have their voices heard in development projects. And Omar, we are grateful to have you here with us again and would love to hear more, especially about this campaign and the work that you're building.
Thanks, Niha. It's really humbling to be here together with all these leaders in the different work that you're doing with communities. And this is important because the work that everyone here is doing is really important. And I hope that we're all able to get the results that we're hoping to get and to stop all these corporate colonialisms that are happening in different parts of the world, especially in the global south. Unlike Asim, I don't have a powerful, beautiful presentation to project to you, so you'll have to look at my face as I make my points. But I'll try to be quite brief, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to engage as much. So one, I wanted to give some context in terms of Africa and what it means for us, because this is the continent that I come from and where I call home. So we are unfortunately a continent that is energy poor. We have more than 600 million people who don't have access to energy. We also have every 4 out of 10 Africans, only 4 out of 10 Africans have reliable access to electricity because of different factors, including theft, mismanagement, and other reasons. But we are also a continent that has contributed the least to the climate problem and conundrum that we're speaking about today, because historically the emissions that we have pumped into the atmosphere are not even making it. They're barely about 4% of the historical emissions coming from Africa. And every year we emit less than 0.4% of the emissions annually within the world. And what this means is, therefore, Africa has contributed the least, but on the other hand, they are being affected, one of the most affected continents as far as climate crisis is concerned. Every 7 out of 10 countries that are most affected by climate change are located in Africa, just to paint a picture of how bad the situation is. And the unfortunate thing now is that all of a sudden, Africa has started to discover different fossil fuel disposals, resources, and availability within the continent. And all of a sudden, most, if not all, of African countries are starting to speak about fossil fuels as transition fuel for us to develop and make the same mistakes that the global north has done from before to get us to this problem that we're in right now, that we also want to catch up economically so that we can also develop, and to hell with everything else, including climate change and how it's affecting us. And what this means is Africa is losing out on an opportunity to actually leapfrog fossil fuels and show that it's possible for a continent, for countries to develop without necessarily utilizing dirty energy options. And while doing that, without jumping all the environmental, social, health, and other impacts that fossil fuels come with, but also showing how it can be done economically, because fossil fuels are now cheaper, if not competitive, to what renewables are now cheaper, if not competitive, to what fossil fuels are. And wind and solar specifically will actually be cheaper than any fossil fuel source in the next 2 years or so. And therefore, let me now transition to the important part of why we're here today, because I felt it's important to give context of how Africa is and how our supposed leaders are looking at how they can develop the continent by utilizing fossil fuels and doing the same mistakes that they've done in the global north to try and get us there without necessarily thinking through different issues. So the project that I'm speaking about today, or the campaign that I'm going to be speaking about today in the next few minutes, is one of the craziest projects ever to be thought, which is called the East African Crude Oil Pipeline, acronym EACOP. And the East African Crude Oil Pipeline is going to be the longest heated crude oil pipeline in the world, standing at about 1,443 kilometers, just over 900 miles. And it's going to be cutting across 2 countries. So it's going to be started at a place called Hoima in Uganda, and it's going to traverse into the heart of Africa, cutting across different rich biodiversity hotspots, several tourist attraction sites, 400 villages, more than 400 villages, more than 200 rivers, 2 of the most important lakes in Africa. And what this means is that we are putting everything and anything within the whole corridor in jeopardy, because if an oil spill happens there, it's a big, big headache. So the pipeline then ends at a place called Tanga in Tanzania. And worst of the worst is that even this resource, and I think it's the truest for most part of the global south, these resources, they're being expropriated by being told that they're going to develop the continent, they're going to create employment opportunities, cheap fuel resources. But the truth is, they're being extracted so that they can be sent to international markets. Most of them end up going to the global north. And it's the true thing that's going to be happening with the East African Crude Oil Pipeline. That oil is going to go to Tanzania, the port of Tanga, get into tanker ships, and then taken into international markets, into other parts of the world. So one, the energy problem is not going to be solved anytime soon because these resources are going out. And also, secondly, now it's the governments of Uganda and Tanzania that have to deal with the consequences, the environmental impact, the climate change impact, the health issues, the economic aspects, the issue around how other sectors are going to be affected, like tourism, agriculture, and different other facets of the economy. All these are going to be headaches that the governments of Uganda and Tanzania have to think around, while Total Energy, which is the biggest shareholder of this project, and they own about 62% of it, and together with China National Offshore Oil Company, they own about 70% of the pipeline. It means that now these so-called sovereign nations of Uganda and Tanzania have to share 15% each from the profits. What's even worse, and I think it's what's happening to most of the global South nations, and why a lot of these companies are looking at global South to take their investments, is because one, the laws that we have within our continent and within the global South are either not as strong to protect us from the climate consequences and environmental harm that's coming from this project, or two, they are able to make sure that they can change these laws within a day or two to make sure that they are conducive, or what they will support them to be able to do business here at minimal cost and maximizing their profits. Or third, they know that they can get away with infringing these laws because impunity here is almost guaranteed. I mean, you can break laws left, right, and center, and chances are anything happening to you are quite minimal. I mean, the only people who bear the brunt of the law in our continent and also in the global South, and I think also it's true to some parts of the global North, are those people who dare to stand and speak up against these harms and problems that are coming to us. And then you're seeing the law being used. Someone is being told that they're against government projects, that they're harming the peace, that they are trying to sabotage the economic activities of these different countries. And therefore, those who are standing up to speak for the grassroots, for the communities, are the one that they are being affected the most. So the good thing, because maybe I've been sharing lots of bad news, but the good thing is this is a campaign that is supported by not only more than 260 organizations within the whole world, and most of them are actually coming from East Africa and within the African continent, but also we've seen push and more people, not just within Africa, but also in different parts of the world, coming in and wanting to make sure that their voices are heard in solidarity with the people of East Africa. We've had more than 1 million people sign petitions and sign different letters, addressed to different people that we want them to see, sense that this project doesn't make sense. We have also seen, fortunately, that some of these financial institutions have some common sense in some other scenarios. I mean, they're still big in investing in fossil fuels, but we're seeing some of them are now saying that they won't be involved in financing EACOP. We have 20 or so banks making a commitment to us that they won't be involved in project financing, although there's an argument that they are, still financing it on a back door because they're giving general loans to some of these companies that are pushing the project. But we will take it as a success in one way or another. We've also seen, because it's a project, so EACOP is a $5 billion project just to build the pipeline. And what I haven't told you so far is that the pipeline itself is to extract the oil that has been discovered in Uganda. So they have two oil fields. One of them is called the Tilenga oil field, and another one is called the Kingfisher oil field. And cumulatively, these two oil fields, they have about 6 billion barrels of oil, and they're hoping to, the proven commercial viability that's available is about 1.4, 1.7 billion barrels of oil that's commercially viable to be extracted. So they will be extracting this oil within the oil fields and then pass it through the pipeline going all the way to Tanzania for international markets. And therefore, the good thing is that it's an expensive venture. The pipeline itself is about $5 billion. Everything put into play, they will need at least $20 billion before they extract the first barrel of oil at the end of the pipeline in Tanzania. And therefore, what this means is it's expensive, and therefore these companies cannot build it by themselves. They need loans, they need insurance for the risk that they're taking. And as I said, 20 banks have confirmed to us they won't be involved. About 3 export credit agencies have also confirmed the same. And now also 8 insurance and insurers have also said that they won't be involved in the project. But we're still worried because one, we have a few banks that haven't responded to us, and we're even worried about 3 banks that are playing what we called a lead financial advisor of the project. And what this means is that they are in charge of making sure that they arrange and bring all the different people who can finance this project to the table so they can finance it. And these 3 banks include Standard Bank South Africa, supposedly an African bank that's being involved in a project that's going to affect Africa and Africans. Another bank is called the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, based in China, definitely. And they're not very big at responding to statements and letters and comments that people are sending to them, including from community and grassroots organizations within East Africa. We've sent them several letters. They've never responded to any one of those. And it just shows about the importance that they're putting to the people. And finally, there's a bank called the Sumitomo Mitsui Bank of Japan, who are also involved as a lead financial advisor, and they haven't yet also responded to our issues. So these banks are key in terms of involvement of this project. And therefore, for us to have a single hope of stopping this project, we need to get at least one of them to confirm that they will not be proceeding further. It's a huge toll for us to do, but it's not impossible. It's possible when people are coming in together, they can really move mountains. So finally, so that I can stop and give an opportunity for others to speak, there are unfortunately a few players within the US that are also involved in this project. And one of those players just came out a few weeks back when a Financial Times article uncovered that a company called Marsh McLennan, which is an insurance broker, is involved in trying to brokerage the insurance required for this project. And they are doing so even when more than 100 of its staff have written a letter asking and begging the senior most people making decisions within the company not to proceed with being involved in EACOP. And this tells you everything that you need to know about these companies. To them, it doesn't make, they don't care about what's happening to people as long as they're making their shareholders happy. And therefore, it's really important that people are involved in pushing them and making them see that their actions have consequences and that we cannot really accept whatever they're doing. It's wrong. They cannot just use the name of doing business. It's wrong, and someone needs to tell them that they need to stop. There are different things you can do to support the campaign. Follow us on social media platforms, but definitely also there's several petitions you can sign, including for Marsh McLennan, asking them not to be involved on EACOP, because by doing so, they are accomplices to this crime and ecocide that is about to happen in the most important part of Africa, just because a few people need to make a killing in the name of profit. I'll stop here. Hopefully, we'll be engaging further. Back to you, Neha.
Wow. Thank you so much, Omar, and especially congratulations for all of the work that has moved forward here. I feel like every time I'm hearing more about this campaign, there are big successes, and I think that hope and those wins are really important for us to hold on to. I want to bring Natalie into this conversation as well. Natalie Lucas is a board member with the Sierra Club and also the engagement specialist with the US Climate Action Network. Natalie, I'm very curious about sort of what you think about what you've heard here today, and also anything that you want to highlight about the United States' role here. We're here today to talk specifically about adaptation, loss and damage, and in the lead up to COP27. So I know you have a little bit of experience with this, and it would be great to hear more from you about your thoughts.
Yeah, this is a really incredible group of speakers, and I'm really honored to be part of it, and touching on so many different elements from protection of civil and human rights that Vaughn had mentioned, and our literal plastic trash and waste from oil being converted into plastics that then ends up in the spaces and places that you live, as well as like this concept of like needing just education systems that actually provide the necessary information. It's so critical. And so for those who do not know, and I sorry, I just started commenting because I got really excited. But so the in Bonn, Germany, which is where Cheryl is right now, they are having the subsidiary body conversations, the 56th subsidiary body conversations for the UNFCCC. And there are two subsidiary bodies. There's the subsidiary body for implementation and then the subsidiary body for scientific and technological advice. And they're talking about all these big policies. I'm bringing this up because one of the things that is also being talked about in something that youth are doing in the SBs right now is an ACE dialogue. So ACE is Action for Climate Empowerment, and it's about trying to engage people around the world to actually engage their populations in managing climate action. And education is a huge part of this. So I'm really glad that Vaughn had brought that up because it's something that's really overlooked, but it is a critical component that if people don't know about the situation and aren't given the resources, I think that's going to be really important. I also just really appreciate what Asim brought in with colonial capitalism and basically like a U.S. huge investor in the polluting factors within Pakistan. And then China is starting to fill that role too in some spaces and places, not nearly as potent as the US, obviously, but the investors and things are starting to become like pretty significant. And that it's very same for Omar's situation too. And except with insurance companies, which I hadn't really thought about before. So this stuff is just so deeply rooted and so deeply financed, and it makes it really, really difficult. What I will say about like the U.S. position, so am based in Cleveland, Ohio, in the United States. I am working with our international team through U.S. Climate Action Network to help push the U.S. government to address some of these issues. And let me tell you, it's incredibly difficult. The strategy at this point is to try to get the U.S. government out of the way so good policies can be made, as opposed to having them be part of the conversations and creating these like really complicated structures that they can't even finance or fund anyway. So one of the things that's being discussed at the international level right now is the fund for loss and damage, as Sherelle had pointed out. And that has been resisted primarily by developed countries, including the United States, and primarily the United States, but also Canada, the UK, Australia. It's just, and the reason is because of this idea that they don't want to pay for what they think what was a liability and compensation sort of conversation prior to recently, where the liability of climate change was put onto the developed nations, which is the responsibility of the developed nations to deal with this, because poor people have been paying for loss and damage, as Cheryl had pointed out a lot earlier. So I just want to lift up some of these things, because I am uncertain that the political ability of the United States to actually really fund and support things that is ripe at this moment. But what I do think is possible is for the US to be able to allow the systems and facilities to be created, and for them to allow for other countries to be putting in money until we are politically ready to be able to do that. And that's like a really hard pill to swallow, because we are responsible for a lot of this stuff, and we are just not putting in the money, supporting communities, and helping countries that really haven't contributed to this problem. But I also want to just be really real about what the situation is right now, because even our we had the NDC of 50% reduction in emissions by 2030. The bill that was supposed to help get us there is Build Back Better, which had not passed. And it's not looking like there will be that. And so I'm trying to think about how do subnationals at the US, talking about how we get fossil fuels out of Louisiana, how do we start pressuring insurance companies and banks to make sure they're not funding these projects? We have to be going after specific targets, because the US government is clearly not going to lead on this. And it is my hope that they will. And it is my hope that the administration will take whatever they can to be able to deal with this. The Biden administration the other day, for example, used the Defense Production Act to work on trying to implement more renewable energies. So there are bright spots in all of this, but I'm just trying to think about what the global context is, and all of these impacts and investments and damages are really real. And so I think it's up to us as US activists to be thinking about how do we push the levers and the buttons that we can to have these international impacts. And I just really appreciate Sierra Club for elevating these important examples and stories, because these are the stories that the US citizens don't hear very much. And you all are doing such incredible work across the world, and our financial institutions are not making it easy for you all. And you're doing it in a lot of situations where it's very dangerous for you personally. And I just want to recognize that. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. And I'm hoping what we can do in the US is really pressure our administration, pressure our subnationals and companies to do what is right, and then hopefully get people to the place and space, which I actually think a lot of people are at. We're just deeply divided right now. I think fundamentally Americans hold a lot of similar values that are about trying to protect people and community and the places and spaces that they love. I think that we are all just traumatized and stressed from the pandemic and from a bunch of other things, from the way that our government is functioning, from white nationalist and white supremacy, and it's making it really hard for us to care for one another. So this is all deeply embedded in a lot of different things, but I'm hoping like together and in solidarity with the rest of the folks like on this call, we can create a situation that ends up to be better for all of us. And I'm really glad Sherelle is in Bonn right now and representing the Sierra Club and being able to also like bring these perspectives to the space. And I'm hoping that Seem, Omar, and Vaughn, at some point you can get to those international conferences if you haven't been already, because your stories are so powerful. And we should also get you in front of these big corporate folks so that they can just hear you directly, because it's clearly super important. So those are my initial thoughts, but I'm happy to talk more in a little while. I have a lot of different like lines of thinking going on right now, just because all of the examples that you provided were so powerful, and there's just so many intersectionalities and complexities to all of it. So I just really want to appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Natalie. I just living in the U.S. And I appreciate your perspective here and sort of bringing to light where we need to be thinking and how we need to be acting, and also acknowledging where things stand for many of us here as well. I want to provide space for us to have more of a conversation here. I don't want to be the only person asking questions of you all. I'm sure that you all have questions for each other from what was shared as well. So just want to give space for that, and maybe we can kick it off with Sherelle, if you have any follow-up questions or any needs going back into the conference in Bonn, specifically from the speakers here.
Thank you for that. Do I have any questions? Well, based on what Natalie just said, I do wonder if our action is ready to be posted. If it is, then please post it. If it isn't, then that's fine. But also, there's a lot of different lines of thinking. I think Natalie is exactly right. If we can get the U.S. just not to oppose the creation of a loss and damage facility, I think that that's like the bare minimum, and that is a win, but that's not nearly enough. But I feel like that's step one right now, honestly. And what I've been talking with negotiators here from the U.S. about is, how do we do the education needed in Congress on the Hill to get us to the point where we're ready to start putting up dollars to help with this, because there's this terrible idea that somehow loss and damage equates to reparations, which it doesn't, right? Like loss and damage is just what's necessary. That money is just what's necessary to make people whole who are being affected by the climate crisis. Full stop, right? Like whether you want to start talking about, who's responsible and who isn't, we all know who's responsible. That's not a debate anymore. I don't care to talk about it. We don't need to talk about it. We just need to put up the money to help with people who are in dire need. And really, when I see like folk like AOSIS and other countries talking about the need for association of small island states, speaking about the need for loss and damage, really, it's heartbreaking for me, because you're seeing people pleading for their humanity, which as a Black woman in America, it's heartbreaking to have to do, which it unfortunately is necessary sometimes, and it's very heartbreaking to have to watch, and that is, I think, the most difficult part about watching these debates, hearing people debate about and talk about, why they should be allowed to live, why their humanity should be recognized, why, for circumstances if they haven't caused, they should be allowed to live in places and still have their culture and still have their homes and still have their livelihood. I mean, these are ridiculous conversations to be listening to. I'm not asking the question that you asked me to answer. I'm sorry. But I think I'm most intrigued by Asim and what you were saying. I don't know if the question at the end was facetious, or do you want people to kind of dig into like who is responsible and how do we create a campaign around figuring this out? But I'm completely down with doing that. But I wanted to hear from you.
Yes, actually, I want to know that what should we do as a grassroots leader, grassroots climate persons? Should we share our concern to U.S. investors? Should we share our concerns or advocacy with the Chinese banks? So, what do you suggest to us?
I
Right.
go ahead, Shara.
Oh no, I didn't know if he
So,
was asking me or
well,
yeah.
Yes.
I was going to say I have multiple lines of thought on that. Yes, we should be doing that. I think part of what our work has been is to bring together all of you. I named, we are about 40 some organizations that have been involved in this space specifically, across 20 countries in the global south. Our voices together is also incredibly powerful. But I also sort of want to ask, Omar, you were sharing about these letters and these actions that you've done so far, seen some success around some investors, some banks, but then others, there's just no response. And I'm sort of curious about the strategy, the ways that you have worked together to move towards the wins, but then also how are you moving around the challenges there?
Yeah, and I think it's an important aspect that people have to think. You don't just think about having a letter and sending it, but you also think, what are you going to do to escalate to make sure that letter is responded to. So you definitely want the language to be diplomatic, but you don't want to be begging, yeah, because they put us into the problem that we're in today. And the moment when it starts looking like it's a favor we're asking them, it becomes a hell like of another different story. But what we've always made sure we do is we have an escalation strategy. So we send the letter and we make sure that we look at the person we're sending the letter to. We make sure that we have as many people as possible, in organizations and individuals, signing onto the letter, so that we send it out. And when we send it to them, we give them a clear timeline of when they have to respond to the letter and what will happen if they don't respond to the letter. So, for instance, you send the letter and you tell them, an example here will be the Stop EACOP campaign. On our website, because we made a list of all these different financial institutions who we know have either financed Total before on fossil fuel projects, or they are big on fossil fuel financing, and therefore they could really be involved on EACOP. We started on a tab on our website where we have all of their logos and publicly stating what they've responded to us. And color coded them. So, like if it's green, it means they're not going to be involved. If it is red, it means they are being involved. If it's yellow, either they haven't given us a direct response of whether they are or they are not, or they haven't responded to us. And we tell them we're going to be posting whatever they say on that website, and we tell them by when they need to do this. And if they don't, or they tell us, yeah, that we're going to be involved, then we make sure we make a lot of noise. We do infographics, posters, saying that this person is involved. We post it on social media. We get people to hype around that. And when someone says they're not going to be involved, we also do the same. And we send this information to the media and all the different other persons. And it's what has led, not just the 20 banks getting out, but there was one point where within a week, we had 7 financial institutions confirming within 1 week that they won't be involved in the project. And we even had some writing to us because people are still pushing them on other fossil fuel projects that they're involved in, by trying to get us to get out of those comments because it doesn't look very good publicly on their part. But what we've also done, I mean, we definitely think it's important that it comes from the grassroots and from the community that you work in. But there are the people who are the pioneers of this letter, or at least are involved in its drafting all the way to the end. But you also should have a plan, because I don't know about, well, I do have some feeling around Asia and some of the global sub countries, but for Africa, our countries are not as democratic as what people think. And most of them, because these projects, fossil fuel projects, are a huge priority to them, not because they will help people, but maybe they already have their own personal or other individual benefits that they're looking to get from the projects. So they don't take kindly when you speak against these projects. So all we've done is we make sure that we have solidarity and people from different other parts of the continent and globe speaking up on the same issue. So for instance, if you're targeting Total, we make sure that we work, because Total is registered in France. So we work with colleagues in France to make sure that they know there that we are against the project, to the extent of even maybe, for instance, an example would have been stopping them from having a physical AGM because of their involvement on fossil fuels. The same for the US. If it's a target we're having in the US, we find someone who's good in the US that could do this. So making sure that you know how a frog, the way they, before, when you see them, if it's angry, how it's like looks like double or even triples its size. That's what you have to do, so that they see the consequences are more. Because at the end of the day, they are pushing out greenwashing campaigns. They want to look like they're investing in renewable energy projects, and these are some of the projects when we call out on them at some point it looks more of a risk to be exposed to these projects, and therefore they will cut their losses and move on to other less and quieter ventures, so to speak.
Thank you, Omar. Any other questions from the group?
Vaughn, I have a question. I saw that you put in the chat how people can support your campaign, but do you want to just say how anyone listening can support what you're doing?
On education and making climate education and information accessible to everyone, especially in Asia and Southeast Asia, you can join Project AIM. We are looking for activists, educators, writers, content creators, and anyone who can help us create these resources into reality, and not only in text, but also in videos, in audios, in interactive games, and also to be translated not only to English and also national languages, but also to ethnic and local and indigenous languages, so that everyone, and to ensure that no one will be left behind. And also, you can also share and follow 0 Hour Asia, 0 Hour Southeast Asia, and 0 Hour Philippines, where we have mobilization campaigns, workshops, and symposiums that we um, organize in the Philippines and in different parts of Asia.
I guess I have a question too. And so a lot of these like large global finance facilities. So let's say that the loss and damage facility actually is created, and that is ability for countries and NGOs to be able to apply for funds to help manage losses and damages that are happening from climate change in your countries. I guess what would be one thing that would be helpful for me to know is just like how funding is tricky, because it comes with a lot of strings. You have to have certain like paperwork to get it. You have to like have applied for a grant. It takes like months to get it. It's so that like is a problem, especially when you're doing loss and damage response, because you're dealing with like in many cases like significant crises, or moving entire cities, or creating entirely new infrastructure so that you can have water in places that you didn't need to have it before. Like there's like a lot of different components to this. Some of it like large scale, and some of it needs to happen on like the local and NGO level. And so I guess what would be criteria or principles or things that you would like an international funding mechanism to follow so that you all could have direct access to the funds you need in order to manage the losses and damages from like your perspective. And whether that's like your country gaining access to it, or if you think that like who should have access, how is it accessible, like how do we make sure that it can get to the people and places that need it most. I guess I just want to hear about barriers that you all have faced and how we can try to bring down those barriers if a facility is actually passed.
Can I speak? So I think these funds should go directly to the civil society and communities, because what we have seen in the recent super typhoon Rai in December of 2021, where where I am currently has been hit by a category 4 super typhoon here in the Philippines. Um, with the relief and donations and support to communities that have been greatly affected by the typhoon. Um, it, when those funds are being transmitted to government agencies, especially local government agencies, what they do is that they deduct money and even resources from those funds. And also, when they distribute these funds, and also when these relief resources are being transmitted and distributed to communities, they already have stamps of government agencies, making it look like that these funds directly came from the government, when these funds are from donations from civil society, from organizations and groups internationally and locally. And so I think we need to give these funds directly to communities and also civil society who are actually working with on the ground with grassroots communities. And in terms of being able to access funds, we need to um, most of the current requirements right now for us is that we need to have at least 2 or 3 years of experience, and we need to provide financial statements or registration with the government and accreditation with government agencies, which especially for us here in the Philippines, it's very difficult for us because our government tags us as climate activists, environmentalists, and organizations. They tag us as rebels and also as terrorists. So it's hard for us to accredit our organizations to be able to um, organize relief operations, because we don't have accreditation from our government, because they are our number one barrier and hindrance to being able to help communities, especially frontlines and grassroots communities.
Omar, did you want to?
Yeah, I definitely agree with everything that Vaughan said. The only thing I would add quickly is I don't want us to look at this as finance, because what really is, it's reparations. These guys have caused the disasters that we're in today. They've benefited at the back of everyone else in the global south, and therefore they have to pay for the loss and damage that people are facing at this particular juncture. And therefore, it shouldn't be money coming with too many conditions about, I don't know, you have to do this, you have to go that, which doesn't make any sense. Because what they're doing is not aid, they're paying for the losses that they've caused. But then, secondly, I also wanted to speak because I agree with Vaughan that the current way of sending this money to governments, while there might be some sense to it, but we've seen many examples where this money is not put into the use that it was expected to be put. So, for instance, you see governments, because they are, waist deep in loans and debt. Some of this money is going back into paying and servicing some of these loans. Some of it is going into recurrent expenditures. Some of them are going into issues that don't make any sense to me. I mean, people are going for meetings, they don't know where, in posh areas to discuss about climate change when they already know what they need to do. and spending all of this money for holidays and their concubines and all these other things. So it becomes important for us that the methodology of how this money is sent, there's someone who's following that up, and that this money really does good use because it goes to those communities and grassroots who've been affected the most by climate change and also have the need and the urgency to make sure that they're taking climate action because it's something that's affecting their lives and livelihoods. I mean, they're the ones who need to adapt and mitigate. Most of these peoples in governments, they can go, leave the country when it's too warm or too hot to go to other places. Others are even thinking about building homes in Mars and other places. So we need to make sure that people who are affected the most by this money are the ones who are getting access and are benefiting from this, so that it's really not about causing another problem where money, someone is saying we've given the money, but this money ends up being misappropriated and enriching other people. So it's sort of moving the inequality and problems just from one master to the next, and that's not the best way to proceed with this. So following the money becomes really, really important, and that really it's the communities who are involved in coming up with the solutions, so that at least 90% gets to work and only 10% gets to be stolen rather than the other way around.
Asim, did you want to follow up as well?
Yes, sure. Actually, as the Pakistan, case is, uh, we don't have any excess of funding for the advocacy campaigns in Pakistan. In before the 4 5 years before, we have the Action Aid and Oxfam. Some of the we can use their funds, and they have some of the projects for the advocacy campaigns and the right-based organizations. But now in Pakistan, after the restrictions on the NGOs, we don't, do any right-based activity, uh, as we don't have any donor in Pakistan to facilitate or fund these activities. So this is very horrible for the civil society. This is very problematic for the civil society to move around and arrange any seminar, webinar, or anything else, any walk around, any sit in, any demonstration, without the funding. So this is very problematic for us in Pakistan, basically. So, but I think the funding and these are should be goes to the, as one said, that the grassroots people, because I as my experience that here in Pakistan, most of the organizations on the name of climate change, just spreading the message for the plantation, and just message for the water, save the water. They don't have any message for the adaptation, for the other research based things. So they are just doing the very simple things and very local things. I think these acts are also important. These are not useless, but for the advocacy campaigns with the international organization, with the banks, with the international financial institution, insurance companies, investors, we should have some resources, and we should have some not the resources of in the shape of funds, but also in the shape of human resource who knows the issues, who can write the letter, who can follow up the activities. So this kind of things we need in Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you all. Natalie, I think the question that you asked is critical, and uh, I just hope that there is a intention put behind getting these answers from the people who would have access to these funds, especially because as we've heard just now, the more bureaucracy there is to access these funds, all of these barriers that are placed. We've seen it before. We see it in so many other places. I think it just becomes yet another thing for whoever to say, you know, we did this, but is it actually leading towards the solutions for impacted people on the ground? You know, I think it's extremely challenging, but at the same time, all of these challenging things, and sometimes I swim in the number of terms that I myself working in this space don't know and don't understand. And so I feel like all of this really just boils down to, are people listening? Are people centering the issues that we see so clearly, that Vaughn, Asim, Omar here have raised and shown us, you know, here's what's happening on the ground in these places. Here's how we're winning. And here's what we don't know. Here's what we need to know. I think as we put our heads together, we're able to get access to that information. We're able to build in solidarity with each other. And to me, that's the goal. We have to be doing that. And as we continue to do that, I think we can push, you know, us in the United States, push the United States to recognize its responsibility consistently, especially around loss and damages. So if any of this is speaking to those of you that are watching right now, watching this later, really request you to take action. We have an action up right now that you can share on. And also for those of you here that are grassroots leaders, climate activists from all around the world, we need to be engaged together. So please stay in touch with especially our international campaign. We are really looking to be intentional in the ways that we are centering grassroots voices and demands, and also shifting what accountability looks like, that even our accountability in this work in the international space is to you and to impacted communities, not just to talk about the issues and, you know, host these webinars, but to actually also bring those solutions to the forefront, to decision makers, and move things forward. So unless there's any last minute questions, I really want to appreciate everybody's time today across so many different time zones. And I really appreciate, as always, everything that was brought to light in this conversation. Great. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you all so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.